Now I'm going to start reassembling this, the front components for this Retina Reflex S. So there's the shutter, which I'd already completed, and we need to fit that to the front component there, and then we need to fit the shutter itself into the whole front of the body casting here. So here's where we start. That's the front cover ring. It sits up in here. Now there's a little post that hooks onto. To find the right one, there's two of them. The one you want is this one, not this little wee thin one here. That little wee thin one is for another purpose, as we're about to discover. On that post we fit this little pinion, this little idler pinion here. So first of all I will put a touch of lubricant in there. That's molybdenum. That fits over the post. This has got a recess on one side. The recess goes over the post. There we go. The next thing to do in here is to fit the detent ball. There's a detent ball fits right here, little ball bearing. Its job is to provide a detent for the shutter speed settings so that they click nicely into place. So I normally put a spot of this molybdenum on the tip of that spring, just to help hold the ball in place. It sits right there. The shutter, there's a little, one of these tabs, there are three tabs that screw this thing down here. One of them's got a little groove next to it. That little groove goes over that post. So I'm just checking that the shutter speed is in the middle of its range, so that I know that tab will come out through the slot. And then this fits over there, so that little piece there with a slot in it goes over there. That should just lower into place. Now that should fit nicely with no fuss. It's normally worth giving the cocking shaft here a bit of a tweak, just to make sure everything is settled down. That felt alright. Right, there are three screws that hold this down, but I put them in there, don't do them up tight. Two of them are easily to get to. The third one's sort of tucked away a bit. I'll show you what I mean. The third one fits right here, which makes it a bit awkward. If you hold in this button, you can shift the lever across and expose that one. So I'll pop in the third screw. Just do it up only a little bit and turn this over. Now this little shield here had popped off centre, so it's just dropped back in there. That's good. I can do those screws up a bit more. And check that the detent ball hasn't moved. That's good, that clicks positively into place. I think we're in business. I'll just try rotating that shaft, and it does rotate. That's good. So I can lift those three screws up. And that is that part of the job done. Our next task is to fit the shutter back into the front assembly here. So there's not much here to watch. That's the shutter release lever over there. That's just going to be popped away to the side. The flash contact goes through this hole in the casting. And with a bit of a wriggle, that drops down into place. Just checking that that lever is sprung loaded and working nicely. There are 4 screws. 2 here that you can see. And 2 tucked away down here in this position, in this position. So they've got to be dropped into place. And done up. As usual, I get them all run down, and once they're all in place, they can be tightened, but not before. That's it. Tighten that. That one. That one. And that one. And that's that little part of the job out of the way. The next part is to get our shutter release lever back on here. That could have been done earlier too. There was nothing to stop me doing that. That can be done before the shutter goes in there. So I'm just giving that a very little wipe there with some molybdenum. A bit in there and in there. There's a spring that sits in this position. We need to get our lever in place. So it swings in, and I'm making sure that the tab here is over this, it's on the top of the spring there in place where it needs to be. There's 2 screws to retain it. That's that. Let's get a bigger screwdriver and tweak them up. That's it. On to the next part. Okay, I'll carry on assembling this shutter for this Retina Reflex S. Right, next these components. There's the washer there. Hard and shiny washer, that's in place. If you've lost your one somewhere, that'll need to be sorted out and look for another. This cam goes on next. I'm just giving that a little wipe with molybdenum. Doesn't need much on the back, but on that curved surface there and in there. It needs that. That sits in there that way up, and swing it back round out of the way. Here's our little coupling gear. it's got a boss on one side here that couples to that groove there. Later cameras than this one had a different system. They had a larger boss there. But they worked on the same principle. So that should hook in. That's good. The small washer that goes on there. And there's the spring that retains it. I'm just putting a little smear of molybdenum on that point. And a single screw that holds that. The other small gear here fits over that cocking shaft. Now it has the flat face goes against the shutter. It's got a D-shaped hole to match the shaft. Here it is, it's dropped into place. Now we have two spacers, thick washers that act as standoffs for this part. And here we have the rack. Now normally I put a smear of molybdenum both sides, very little. Run some down there. And this hooks in here. Let's take that away for a second. Now generally you'll start with this cam all the way back against the post here. Because this is a very early model of Reflex S, I'm supposed to have a small space in there instead, so I'm just going to swing that out slightly. This rack, which fits in like that, you're in tooth engagement. You engage in the first slot here and in the fifth slot here. I'm just counting to make sure that's the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's correct. Pop those two pieces back. And here's the bracket that holds it all in place. Now I'm putting a bit of molybdenum on the inside here. That acts as a bush that guides that gear. Two screws, so far so good. Now, a couple more components here. We have this idler gear here, and there's the bush that it runs on. So I'll run some molybdenum around the inside of that. This gear is smooth on one face has the teeth are slightly stepped down on this side. Now the smooth face goes to the back. The bush can drop down in the middle of it. Now we've got this arm. This arm has a couple of jobs, but one of them is to do the flash sync. So what I have to do, it fits in this way up. I have to run a little bit of molybdenum on there so that it's lifted by the rack as the rack comes through. The rack slides under that. This also stops the rack from moving until the capping plate comes up and lifts this, and then the rack runs through underneath it. Here and there for good measure. See if we can hook this into place. Yes. And this single black shouldered screw that goes in there. Make sure that wire doesn't get trapped underneath there, otherwise it'll be causing me grief. That's better. Make sure that screw, that the arm fits over the shoulder of the screw. There it is, that's the weight. And that is that component done. Two more tasks to do here now. One is to resolder this connection. As I said, there's a washer that goes on here, an insulating washer, which I'll put in place. And then tuck those cables down neatly. And then we had two felt pads here that the mirror ran against. Well, I'm going to replace that with a little leather strip, as like the later cameras had. It's just a bigger bearing surface for the mirror to hit, and that'll work nicely. So I'll put in that washer, that insulating washer. It's just got a slot in it, it's just fiberboard. I'll fit that over the contact and solder that on, and I'll do that off camera. Right, well, I have my contact soldered back in place and the wires tucked neatly back down where they should be. I'm just going to test the shutter now. Here I've got the cam arrangement out of another Retina Reflex S that I'll use to do this job. So I'll rotate that to cock the shutter, release it, the blades close. This tab here would normally be lifted by the capping plate. That comes up and the shutter fires. So that's all working exactly as it should do. So we can take that piece out. Now I've got two jobs to do here. One is to glue in that little piece of leather, and the other is to put some black paint on here to cover that shiny thing, as it should have been done before. So first we'll do the paint, I think. So let's use some black paint. It's getting a bit thick and dried up looking, but it'll do for my purposes here. This is just some flat black paint, water based. Now in an ideal world that little washer would be glued down into place, but because I'm in a hurry and this is more than adequate, I'm just going to put a little bit of extra black paint there, and that black paint will glue it down just as well. Alright, so much for that. Just check that that washer's tucked down into place properly. And it is. That's good. Now, my little piece of leather that I'm using as a buffer for the mirror. I'll put a bit of glue down there and then I'll transfer that over with the toothpick. Here we have it, and that fits on here. I'll just press that down into place. There's a little notch cut out of this leather piece, and that's just so it's not rubbing on that gear. And that is it. That's ready to go back in the camera. That's all that needs to be done there.